Hello, everybody. This is Chris Wells, the Bass Chaplain, and you have reached the Bass Chaplain Fishing Podcast. And we are so delighted that you've chosen to join us again. We have got a super show for you today. But before I tell you who our guest is going to be, I want to tell you about these folks over at J3 Fishing. I met these folks at the Bassmasters Classic. Jackie and Jason Embry, or Jason and Jackie Embry, however you want to say them, but they're an awesome couple. And they've started a lure company, J3 Fishing. They sent me some samples, and I got to tell you, these things look awesome. It's a modular spinnerbait system, and just awesome looking baits. And they call it the Lord's Lure Company. Now, you know, on the Bass Chaplain, you're going to get a shout out for those. They've got 1 Timothy 1:15 on the back. It says, "The saying is trustworthy and deserving of full acceptance that Jesus came," I can't read anymore, "into the world to save sinners, of whom I am the most." Great people. You can check them out over at www.j3fishing.com. Give them a look. You want to pick up some of those spinnerbaits. I can't wait to use some of them. Today's guest is a superstar and a legend in the sport of bass fishing. He is a bass fishing Hall of Famer, 9-time champion, probably the most experienced and well-known sight fisherman in the history of bass fishing. And he was the host of One More Cast with, that's right, Shaw Grigsby is going to be on the show today. So stay tuned. The Bass Chaplain Fishing Podcast, where faith and fishing hook up. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Bass Chaplain Fishing Podcast. I have with me as my guest today a man that is a legend in the sport of bass fishing, over $2.3 million won in tournaments. And he is unarguably the greatest sight fisherman that has ever walked the planet. Also the host of One More Cast with Shaw Grigsby. I love that show. That was my favorite fishing show of all time. Shaw, welcome to the Bass Chaplain Fishing Podcast. We are so happy to have you. How you doing, man?
Thank you, Chris. I honored to be here, buddy.
Man, I tell you, we go way back, and there's a lot of just, I don't even consider you a friend. I consider you a part of my family. And so that's how, that's the way it is. I mean, you grew up in Gainesville, Florida, born there, raised there, and lived there. And I got to tell you, I wouldn't mind living in Florida. I really wouldn't. I like the state of Florida. I really do. So
truly, it's a great state. And I love, being born and raised here. And, the hunting is pretty good. Fishing, it's something that you can be outdoors 365 days a year, which is nice. You don't have to have snow days or stuff like that. I have seen snow, I think 8 or 9 times in my 66 years of living.
Wow. Snow in Florida. That's something else. Good night.
Very rare. One time we could even snowballs.
snowball fight fun. That would be rarer than killing an Osceola for me. That would be pretty bad. So it was, we just had Mark Prudhomme on, and he was telling me the difference. I didn't know there was a different kind of turkey. And so, but he was sharing with me, but man, it would probably be remiss if we didn't start off this podcast today. The passing of a legend happened this week. Ray Scott went to be with the Lord. And man, I was thinking about that, watching Jay Kumar's Bass Blaster. Without Ray Scott, none of what we do would exist. I mean, he literally created the bass fishing world. And I know you were good friends with Ray. Tell us a little bit about Ray and what you remember about Ray.
Well, I agree wholeheartedly. It was his vision and his tenacity to bring this sport around, to actually develop it. So his vision, I'm just, it's a very sad moment. Everybody, is going to die. Everybody's going to die. And so, that's happening. But it's just sad to lose a legend like that. I mean, he's truly the father of bass fishing. And so everything we do, whether it's in major league or, Fishers of Men Trail or all the BASS trails, all the different trails that are out there, they all are around because of Ray Scott.
That's exactly right. I remember, as everybody has been putting up pictures this week of them and Ray Scott. Of course, I went, my wife and I went on our first 4 vacations. We're to the Bassmasters Classic, and just getting to talk with Ray Scott was, the highlight. And he really, I kind of watched him. He was personable with just about everyone that he ever talked with, took time. I remember, talking to him about a friend of ours, a mutual friend of ours, Doug Odom. I remember, talking with Ray Scott about Doug, and we're going to talk about Doug in a minute. I called him last night and he said, listen, you mention me on about every one of your podcasts and you always get the facts wrong every single time is what he keeps saying. But Ray Scott was truly a legend. And it's wild how a rainy day and a missed fishing trip in a hotel room can literally change the world the way Ray Scott did with his vision to start tournament fishing. And man, I was watching your Bass Caves video that you did back in January this year, and it was so awesome. But one of the things you talked about was you used to have to weigh your tackle box at the Classic, and you had to have like a 10-pound minimum or something like that. Tell us about that.
Maximum. Yeah, you could only bring 10 pounds of tackle. So they had the weight of the tackle box, and they knew what that was, and you could bring 10 pounds. And so, but Ray would always mess with people. He was such a jokester all the time. And he would, bring a little brick along, and he'd take somebody's tackle box. Now, if you had over 10 pounds, he got to choose the tackle he gets to take out. So he'd most likely choose your favorite plug, your favorite bait, and, so anyway, he dropped a brick into a tackle box, and next thing you know, he's pulling tackle out, and they're like, wait, and it was awesome.
Man, but, I've heard those stories a lot, about him, messing with everybody's tackle box and things like that. I really miss that. I miss that element of the sport. He came up with some pretty creative things. And, having everybody, like the year they have them on a jet and they take them and nobody knew where they're going to fish and all the different things. He had to be one of the most creative human beings that has ever walked this planet, for sure. No doubt.
He absolutely was, and the greatest thing, he had a blank page. He had, it had not been done. We weren't, there weren't tournaments, there weren't things to go by. And he just invented them as he went along. And it was fabulous. I mean, just think he's the one that introduced and had people to start catch and release and put live wells in a boat. And there were just so many things that he was the instigator in. And in other words, he drove the sport to produce bass boats. He drove the industry to make, changes in bass boats. And it's just pretty cool when you see how far reaching everything he did, how far it reaches out into everybody's lives.
Man, now your first Classic you ever fished in was 1986. Is that right?
That's
first time you
correct.
Right now, what was it like? How is the sport fishing? I know that you've got the Red Crest now, but back there in the Classic, how is it different? What do you remember about that first Classic?
The first handful of Classics I fished, maybe 5 or 6, were all, maybe even more than that, were all done Ray Scott style, and you literally would show up, and when you finally got on the water, it was a blessing because you were running from one thing to the next to press people to this. Every day you would fish, you'd come in and you rush to your change clothes real quick, jump on a bus, go to an event, and you wouldn't get back until the buses brought you back 10:30, 11 or whatever. And so, you're getting very little sleep, you're running crazy. And it was definitely challenging, so much more than it is now, in the sense that now you really can concentrate on your fishing, and you only have a few events that you have to, have to go to. And so it's really more that you can enjoy your fishing. Now, man, when I got on the water, I was like, oh, thank goodness I'm on the water because everything else is just going crazy, and at crazy times. But yeah, it was interesting. He always had you going somewhere, sometime, PRing for this and that, and it was just it was fun, but it was exhausting.
I'll bet it was. I bet that was exhausting when you're doing all that stuff. Well, listen, we I've always considered myself the connector guy. And what I mean by that is I'll connect people and then they'll just forget about me. I've mentioned that on podcasts before, but I was down at Alice Drive Baptist Church a number of years ago in Sumter, South Carolina. We brought you in to speak at a wild game banquet. And there was this dude that I had met. His name was Doug Odom, and he was from Florida originally. And somebody, he came in for like a power lunch or something, and someone introduced me to him. Well, I immediately, Doug became the guru, my best friend, the guy that I just wanted to hang out with. But he fished in the Classic in 76 and 77, and I introduced you to, and I know you've forgotten that, but I said, hey, Shaw, this is Doug Odom, and you looked around and you said, the Doug Odom, and you told him, you said, hey, you remember one time you were on such and such a river, and two kids came up to you and you taught them how to tie this rig. He said, that was me and my brother. That was me and it was wild. So we've known old Doug Odom for a long time, and he's a special guy. So I don't know if you remember that story or not. We were telling about that.
That was, a little different than the way you told it, but yeah, I came for that wild game banquet, and I just spoke for a minute, but you or the pastor, but somebody told me Doug Odom was in the crowd.
It was me. It wasn't the pastor. Clay Smith doesn't know a fisherman from a golfer. He's got no idea. So it was me. So
told me Doug Odom, the Doug Odom. He goes, yeah. So when I got up on stage, that's, I hadn't seen him, hadn't met him or whatever. I got up on stage, and first thing I did, I said, is Doug Odom out there? And so they thought you had messed with him and I was going to harass him about being a fisherman or whatever. And then I told the story. I said, you won't remember me, but my best buddy and I were out fishing, and I'm talking like I was 16 years old. Wow. And we're out in a little itty bitty boat, and we're learning to catch these black drum out of the Swanee River. And this guy is out there in a boat just mashing them. And he was kind enough to come over to us and go, guys, y'all, I want to learn how to catch these things. And we go, yes, sir. Yes, sir. We're watching him catch one after. And these things are from 30 to 70 pounds. I mean, they were big. And Doug was just, hooking them hand over fist, just catching them. And we were in awe. Anyway, and he showed us, I think he was showing us a little George and some baits to use and what to look for and stuff. And then, in closing, I just asked, who are you? And he said, Doug Odom. And I stepped back in the boat and I said, are you the Doug Odom I read about in Bassmaster magazine? Again, there's another hand of Ray Scott in there. I was such a big fan back there in 72, 73, 74. I mean, I was, reading it all the time. Right. And he goes, yeah, that's me, and I went, wow, well, I never see that guy again until I show up at that wild game banquet. And there he is. And I told the story. I said, you won't remember me, but you did that and helped two kids out. And we had fantastic times catching him after that. He just taught us so much. And then, so I got to meet Doug, and we've been best buddies ever since, of course, with you too. But what's really cool is Doug came up with this saying, and it's the same saying we see all the time. You see it all the time on signs on the lake and all that. It's watch your wake, Yeah. And because as a boater, you want to make sure your wake doesn't capsize another boat or doesn't hurt somebody's property on their docks or cause issues. But Doug twisted it around in watch your wake, because each one in our life, we put out a wake. We put out who we are and what we do and what we stand for. And that wake touches other people, and it just spreads out. And so that's kind of a really beautiful saying for life is always, watch your wake a bit, and
Right.
and
Yeah.
know
You're
that it's
responsible
gonna
for your own
go
wake. Yeah. Yeah. That is awesome. I'd forgotten that he said that. I remember he talked about maybe going through Lake Seminole somewhere and seeing a sign that says you're responsible for your own wake. And it just kind of dawned on him. And he
Yeah.
has those spiritual insights all the time. And that's awesome
Yeah.
thing. Well, speaking of spiritual insights, I'm going to get you to teach us how to be a better sight fisherman in just a minute. But I want you to share with you about your testimony. I've heard you tell your testimony so many times, and I remember you shared it at a game banquet that we did in Greenville, and just many people came to know the Lord that night. And but just share us about how you came to know Jesus. We'd like to hear that.
There's so much to it, and there's so much of my testimony, but it's kind of cool that we had this preacher, that would come on the tour with us. His name was Terry Chupp,
Right.
and he was fishing, professionally. And he would be, if you remember those old days of tournaments, they would have a registration line, and you go through that registration line, and they give you free baits and hats. I mean, Ranger boats. I don't know how many Ranger boat hats I got, because they give them out every tournament, and just all kinds of baits and fishing line stuff. And they wanted you to use those baits and hopefully win the tournament, help sell baits. And I come by this one booth, and here's Terry Chupp, who's a fisherman, and he'd hand out these little Bibles. Anyway, so I take that bag and I put it in my garage and get stuff out. But I got a pretty good collection of Bibles for going through the line all the time.
Yeah.
Well, he handed out a tape. Now most people don't even remember they made cassette tapes.
Right.
We had 8-tracks when I was growing up, even, and before that you just had a radio. But because I'm pretty old dude, but I'll tell you how old I was. I used to listen to radio shows with my parents. Okay, growing up, we didn't have a TV. But anyway, so I'd get this cassette tape, and it went in the bag, and you expected it to go to the garage. And it didn't. It went from the bag. I got all my good baits. That tape went in my suitcase, and then it traveled with me for, I'm gonna say, almost a year. And one day I'm coming back from a tournament at Lake Havasu. My dad's with me. He's in travel with me. My dad's going to sleep in one seat. We're just driving. We were on CDs back in the day. Talk got kind of stale, and so everybody's just driving, and I'm sitting there. I got that tape. What was really cool is I could hit the recline in my seat, and I reached back in my suitcase, and there it was, right on top. After and repack for a year, be right on top. That's another one of those. How did that happen? I plugged it in, and it was testimony, and I got to listen to Hank talk Jesus in life.
Right.
And it hit me that through my experiences in life, I have a great wife, great family, great career. I wasn't truly happy. And listening to Hank talk about Jesus in real life, I knew that's what I needed. I knew that's what was the completer of my life. My life was going to be complete if I put Jesus there. And I understood that, and I was convicted in my heart, but I didn't really know exactly how to do that other than listening to what Hank said. And I didn't know how friends and family would feel about it and all that. So I kind of delayed a little bit and kind of went on in my life. And then I go through the line. I'm down at Lake Okeechobee on a tournament, and I go through the line again, and there's Terry, and he grabs my hand. How you doing, brother? And he goes, let's have dinner tonight. And I'm like, uh-oh. And I go, okay. So off I went to dinner with the preacher, and over a bowl of hot sour soup down at Lake Okeechobee, I prayed to receive Jesus Christ as Lord and Savior. And my world changed. It just changed. And I can't tell you, I've got so many experiences where God touched me, where Jesus literally put his hands on me and led me through different things in life. And I just, it's stunning, once you accept him, how he
Yeah.
opens your heart, he opens your eyes, he opens your mind. You get to realize that he was there with you the whole time, that he loves you. And I don't care who you are out there or what you've done in life, he loves you. And it's
Mm,
amazing how much he loves you. And it's stunning. It's truly stunning.
mm.
Greatest experience I've ever had is accepting Jesus Christ as my Lord and Savior.
Man, Terry Chupp, I'll tell you this story. I wasn't planning to tell this, but since we mentioned Terry, Terry came to my wife's funeral and he showed up about 10:30 and we're going to have like a brunch. So I invited him in there to eat. And he said, Chris, tell me about your family. And he's looking at my family. I mean, he's 83 years old now. And I said, I've introduced everybody. I said, that's my nephew. And he asked me who had a relationship with the Lord. And I was going through, and I said, I don't think my nephew does. Well, Terry did his patent and we'll bring him over to me type of deal. And so, you know what happened? Terry led my nephew and his wife to Christ before my wife's funeral. And so it was absolutely awesome. And I know that my wife would, if you told her, that you're going to have to go through cancer, for your nephew to be saved, I know she would have said, yeah, bring on the cancer. And so, it was a powerful, moment of many that day. And so it's pretty awesome. But man, I know, I think that, when I was chaplain of Bassmaster and then Major League Fishing, you were about at every single Bible study I ever did. And I appreciate that. I knew I'd at least have Shaw there. And so I appreciate you being there every time we had an event and doing that. But let's move over to the fishing segment. I know that people, you've kind of been branded. I know you can fish anything and anytime, but you've kind of been branded. Your thing is, everybody thinks of you as the sight fishing guru. So tell us how that came about and what can we do to be better sight fishermen, because that's the most frustrating type of fishing there is for me. I just want to just quit during that time of year. So lay it on us, man. Share with us what we need to do.
I started sight fishing just in Florida because I wasn't that great of an angler. So I would see one on a bed, and they said back in the day they could never catch them. So if you see one on a bed, just don't be they're not a bite. And but when you're not a great angler and that's the only fish you might catch, you just sit there and you start playing with them and pestering them and playing, and all catch one, you go, uh-oh. And then you learn to do it, and then you learn to do it quicker and quicker. And I thought I was pretty good, right? I said, well, I'm pretty good. And then I got on with Joe Hidden on the St. Johns River. And we go to Salt Springs, and they're beautiful beds everywhere. And I'm like, yeah, I got a couple over here and a couple over there. And so Guido and him would watch me, fish the bed and fish. And he says, you done with that yet, son? And I go, yes, sir. He'd fire over there, catch them. And I'm like, every time I'm like, oh my gosh. So he taught me about, a little bit about how they move, how they, hold around beds, and little secrets about that. He taught me about the gets it back then, tube bait. And man, what a difference. I just, then I started really lighting them up. So, it just transpired, and fortunately I got to fish with Guido, but then I just kept going at it. And back then we didn't have a whole lot of people that sight fish. So I won a lot of tournaments doing it. And then, I even led the other day, led day one.
Right, yeah.
And so that, that's, you got some awful good anglers out there now. I mean, these kids learn so much so early. It's just amazing how good they are. So I felt pretty honored to be up there.
Man, that was a great tournament you had there. And of course, now in Major League Fishing, on the app, they have where you can star the angler that you want to do. You're one of my stars. And so I got boom, boom. I was, of course, we were going through all the stuff we're going through at my house. So I didn't get a chance to watch it as closely as I normally do, but you really, it was, we were jacked up, but you were leading on the first day, I believe. And it was a good tournament for you. And I'm glad to see that. So if you want to be a better sight fisherman, what are some things, I get there and I get so frustrated when I can't catch a fish, when I can see the fish and you need the fish and you can't catch that fish, what are some things that you can do to try to, to try to get better as a sight fisherman?
Yeah. So, first thing is that you learn some little tricks about them. A lot of people, talk about getting it to this particular spot on the bed and all that, and that, you get it in there, and you see some guys, that guy that won the one, I think it's Santee, and he was hitting the bottom of his rod and shaking the
Right.
rod,
Yeah.
and all those things work because you're making that bait look like it's eating the eggs or whatever, but or it's disturbing the nest and they get fired up. One of the true secrets that I have is I don't cast on the bed. It seems to work very well for me to cast past the bed so that the line is through basically the center of the bed. You don't want it on left or right. You want it right through the middle of the bed, and you cast across it and then work it kind of slowly back to it. Now, what happens with that is that fish sees it coming. So he turns to it, which is away from you. So that's a good thing. He's not looking at you. He doesn't pay attention to you. And you got him looking at your bait. Well, now he's getting all mad as it's coming close to him. Like, you're not supposed to come up to my bed. And they keep getting madder and madder as it gets closer and closer. A lot of times they just club it. So, first cast is important. Try to stay as far back as you can, make the longest cast straight across the bed, and work it extremely slow. And that works like, a high percentage of the time. Once they know you're there, let's say they move off the bed and they've got to come back, and then you have to start working. Then it gets to be more of a chore. And, then you're watching that fish and you're watching what makes him mad. What is he doing? And so, I wear sunglasses, I wear Strike King, but I wear these yellow lenses. So yellow attracts light and you can see details better. So you can see his fins wiggling and like getting all flustered, and you can tell as that fish is getting madder and madder, or what you're doing is right, or the other one you see like he doesn't care, then what you're doing is wrong. So after a while you pick up on those little things, and next thing you know, you're able to work a fish. As long as you can see him, you can work a fish and really get him going and catch him.
Well, how do you stay back and see them? You've got eagle eyes. I mean, everybody talks about that. Everybody talks about you can see them really well, but that's for my deals. I'm like, I don't throwing it that far. How do you do that? Well, what's the key to that?
First cast, I don't ever have to see them. I just got to know the bed's there. So you can see the glow of a bed or know it's there, whether you you have it next to a bush or next to a dock pole or something like that. It's there, and you don't have to see it. So you can just fire the cast up, go past it, 3 or 4, 5 feet, and then just start working it back just ever so slow. And remember, if you lift your rod 6 inches, that bait's moving a lot more than 6 inches in the water with the bow of the line and all that kind of stuff. So you really want to move it like, an inch or quarter inch at the time, and just kind of feel it on the bottom and maybe jiggle a little bit, and where it looks like it's crawling on the bottom. So all those are tips, but yeah, I don't actually have to see them on that first cast. That's good. If I can't get them to go on that first cast or two, then I'll ease up just a little bit, to where now I can see a little bit of the bed and see a little bit more. Okay, I see a dark line in and out of the bed, and now I start fishing it. And then if that doesn't work, then I get a little closer, So I caught one of them there though at Lake of the Ozarks. I was coming out of a pocket, and I literally ran over him with my trolling motor in about 1.5 feet of water. So I'm like, oh my goodness, and I shut the trolling motor off so it just wouldn't blow him off the bed. The boat drifted a little bit. I turned the trolling motor on. I just dropped the bait right over the side of the boat, turned the trolling motor on, moved the boat off, turned a bit, set the hook, and put him in the boat. So sometimes they're that easy too. And you just don't know. You just don't know. So some of them get to be so aggravating, you just have to give up on them, and sometimes you catch them pretty quick.
Well, how does line size play into it? What's your line size? What's your go-to line size?
My normal is going to be probably 10. That's kind of a normal for me. 10, maybe 12. I don't mind hooking a 5-pounder on 10-pound test or whatever. It's no big deal. Now, if you got a really big one, I'm probably going to put anything from 20-pound fluorocarbon, cigar, all the way up to 50-pound braid, before like if I know I've got a giant, I'm going to put some big stuff on him to where I know I don't have it to worry about it. So, but most of the time, most of the fish I'm fishing, I'm just throwing 10 or 12 and that works just fine.
What's the biggest fish you've ever caught sight fishing? You remember that one?
13.6. I remember it vividly. I caught it in a PAA tournament back when we had the professional anglers.
Right, yeah.
So before we started Major League Fishing, we started that, and we had one at Toho at Kissimmee Chain, and it was day one, and I only had 3 little scrawny males, and I'm like dying, and I get hung up on somebody's braid, and of course I didn't want to. They had just been shiner fishing and left a big pile of braid out there, and I didn't want to break it off, because you break off a tungsten weight, that's $5,
right? Yeah.
And a hook, and back then it was a rodent that I was throwing, and that's $10 that you're throwing away when you set the hook or break it off on braid. So I trolling motored to the braid to get my line unhung, and I also was pulling the braid in. But anyway, as I was trolling to it, I see this bass on her bed. And I just make a note right where it is. I just blow right on by. I grab the braid, I pull it all up, I put it in my cooler where I keep all my garbage. I put it in the cooler. I turn back around, power pole down at a long cast to this hole in the grass. And my partner says, "What are you doing?" I said, "I'm fixing to catch a 7-pounder." I thought it was 7. And so I made a long cast in there and got bit with this rodent. And I was throwing 20 pound. So I lift it up, get a bite, set the hook, miss it. So now I'm all excited, think it's a 7-pounder, and I re-rig real quick, hook it back up, throw it back in there. He bites it, takes off, I set the hook, and I land about a 4-pounder. And I'm like, well, that's the male, because I know the female is way bigger than 4. So I put it in the boat. That means I've got four fish in the live well now. I get re-rigged, I throw it back out there, and boom, one hits it, and I go, "Oh my goodness, the big one's there." I set the hook and miss her, because they was, when they're bedding, they mouth it a lot,
right,
or spit it out and do things like that. So now I'm shaking, I throw it back out there and I get hung. I make a bad cast and get hung, and I'm like, "You got to be kidding me!" And so I go to break it off, and it doesn't break; it comes undone. But I'm not going to trust it, because I pulled so hard on it that I cut it, retied, put another bait on, made a good cast this time. So it was my 5th cast, and I get it down there, go donk, and I went, "Ooh, there it is." And then it just kind of pulled me down, which was good, because that meant she was going away. And I set the hook and nothing moved. It was like you hit rock, and all of a sudden I see this mouth open up and just turn its head, shake to the left and right. And I'm like, "Oh my gosh," I saw this mouth open up that was so big. I went, "That's not a 7-pounder." And so I start fighting it in, and Terry Seagraves had given me a net, because we were allowed to use nets in the PAA. And I get it up to the boat, and it's and I can't get it in the net. It's too big to go in the net.
Man.
And it dove down, wrapped up around the grass, and I'm like, "You gotta be kidding me!" And then it pulled all the grass up. I knew I'd lost him at that point. Pulled all the grass up. It was coming one more time, and it's had the head on the surface, trying to dig down as I'm peeling it up. And I got the net under it, and then I let him, as soon as the head crested the edge of the net, I let the fish dive into the bottom of the net and grab the net with 2 hands and put it into the boat. And it turned out to be 13.6, big. And
how jacked were you to catch a 13.6 to bring that one to the scale, man?
It was
golly.
What was really cool is Bobby Lane had come into the area, and he was just up from me, and he saw that. He said, "How big is that?" And I tried to put him on my scale, but he wouldn't weigh. My scale only goes to 15, and the scale wouldn't weigh. And I'm like, "I don't know, it's big." He said, "When do you got to go in?" I said, in just a little bit." He said, "I'll follow you in, man. You don't want to miss that one in case something goes wrong."
Wow.
That's how Bobby Lane is, and our fellow competitors, man. You just think about people that you meet out there, and just how good they truly are inside.
Yeah, they are. Yeah. I love the Lanes. I love both of those guys. They're awesome. And, I fished, I rode with Chris Lane one time up at Clear Lake, California, and he was just a hoot all day long. And so they're great guys, but I can't imagine. I don't imagine that very few people in a professional tournament have weighed a 13-pounder I think Mark Menendez may have weighed a 13-pounder, but I don't know if anybody else has weighed a 13-pounder. That's got to be a good honor right there. I mean, that's wow. You got me choked up on that one. That's I wasn't expecting 13-pounder. That's amazing deal. But one of the most beloved segments of the podcast is imitating other anglers. Now when we do the imitation part, they always say that when you're imitating someone, that's the highest form of flattery. So we ask all of our anglers that we have on the podcast to do an impersonation of one of their other competitors. So if you got one for us today, Shaw, I gave you a little leeway on that, and so I didn't know if you were gonna go ahead and lay one on us here.
I'm a terrible imitator, but you need to just get out of my spot right now. But the only guy that I can kind of imitate, even somewhat, and I'm not good at it, would be Tommy Biffle.
Tommy Biffle. That was a good Tommy Biffle. That was, yeah. Tommy is colorful. I mean, that's a colorful human being.
I got to tell you, this is really quick story. So I'm fishing one of our early major league fishing events, a cup event, which it wasn't a cup back then. It was just major league fishing. We're at Chautauqua in New York, and they had a zone for us. So I go to the end of I look around the whole zone. I get to the end of the zone. There's a little rocky point there where that's the end of the zone. And I just stop. I said, this is where I'm going to start, throw a top water and get it going. Well, Biffle comes by me and runs off course. So now he's out of the zone. And I'm like, well, that's crazy. He comes back, he puts his trolling motor, and he's about, I don't know, 60 yards, maybe 70 yards from the point. And we're just seconds away from lines in. And so I, just being a nice guy, I yell over to Tommy. I said, hey, Tommy. I said, you know, you're off course. You're not on the course yet. He goes, oh yeah, I am. I go, no, you're not, dude. It's right here. I'm sitting on the point. So his boat official gets up there, they get the pad, they're looking and they're making sure, and they go, oh yeah, well, I make a cast, right? And I work, I don't get a bike. I make my second cast. Well, Biffle now is right beside me. He makes a cast over my line. And I went, really? So I'm just sitting there, and he works his bait and he works my line in. And that's like I think for casting over a guy's lines, like a 2-minute penalty. And this was his first cast of the day.
Oh man.
Tagged him right there. He's like, well, no, you threw it under my line. I go, no,
threw it under your line.
I love Tom, man, and I'm just so proud of him. He got the Bass Fish Eye Hall of Fame this year.
Man. What an honor. I tell you, he was the first guy to ever really hurt my feelings when I remember watching him one time. He was talking about, in the end, he was talking about pitching and flipping, of course. And he said, and all you right-handed guys, y'all just need to learn how to do it left-handed. That's what he said. And I was like, man, Gary Klein does it right-handed. It's all right. So, but he is quite a character. One of the things I'm springing this on you, but one of the things that I ask, when I get to ride in a boat with a lot of guys, and over the years I've written, being the chaplain, I've had a chance to ride with a lot of guys. And I always ask them, what is your worst co-angler and worst marshal experience that you've ever had? And so I don't know if you ever had a bad experience or not, but I can't wait to get Jared Littner on the show, because he is by far got the best worst co-angler and worst marshal experience that I've ever heard in my life. And so I can't wait. But if you had, I know that, you're talking about throwing over lines. That's what made me think about that is if you ever had a bad co-angler, or you ever had a bad, you don't have to tell their names, but
I've had a couple, my goodness, I've been doing it
right.
30 years. That's a lot of tournaments, and I've had a couple, but not very many. Most of them are very respectful, very guys. And but I did have one that was just kind of went nuts, and I'm like, really, just one of these guys, you just got to scratch your head. And then But I did have one where I told him, I said, here's the deal. He said, I'm down at Okeechobee and I'm throwing a buzz bait. And when they hit this buzz bait, it's going to be a big one. And it's my fish. You throw a buzz bait, it's yours, it's your fish. You throw on him, it's yours. I'm not messing with him. So anyway, I'm reeling my buzz bait, boom, a 7+, crushes it, of course, misses it. I reel it real quick, put it down, grab my worm, fire in on it. He hits my worm, which is what they did every time. I reel down, set the hook, missed him. So I have another rod. I reel down, I grab the second rod. His line hits on it, sets the hook, and catches my fish. I was like, hot. But he did give me to his deal. He gave me a shot, but that was still my fish. But anyway, what the heck?
That's hard. I know that, the Marshall program and Bassmaster, and then, of course, Major League Fishing, you're in your own boat. Back in the day, you guys had to compete against one another. I mean, you either had another pro in the boat or you had a co-angler in the boat. Is that right? I mean, you remember those days? Yeah.
Sometimes you'd have a tough one that, really, really, you had to really fight them. But most of the time the pros were exceptional. I mean, the first time I got paired with Gary Klein, I'm a rookie. I mean, I'm a rookie on the Bass Tour in '84. I get paired with him, and it was a September tournament on the Hudson River. And he invites me up. He says, man, come on up here. Come on right beside me and just fish this. We're fishing seawalls and stuff. And I mean, no question at all. No, stay back there and let me catch it. No. And he beat me pretty good. He beat me, I caught a limit, I think, before he caught maybe one. And I think I caught a limit, but he all day long, he kept upgrading his and I didn't. And so he ended up with about a pound more than me, maybe a pound and a half, and went on to make a good check, and I got paired with Rick Clunn, same type of deal, man. He's like, man, I'm with you. This is your water, and then I got paired with him at Lake Powell and I'm like, I'm with you. This is your water. And when you share like that, you learn so much and you have good days. If the person will fish with you, there's a lot of just wonderful sharing that goes on, knowledge transfer. You learn so much. And I've had a bad pro too. One of the early pros that I ever drew, he wouldn't let me use my boat. And so he made, I said, we need to flip. And he goes, no, we're not going to flip for boat. He said, let's use mine, blah, blah. He said, I'll give you the front on your stuff, and all that kind of stuff. And so I said, okay, I trusted him. It was one of my early, and we get to my spot and it's my spot. So I'm going to get up front and I'm starting to flip down a canal edge. And he walks around and gets on the very point of the boat and gets in front of me. And I'm like, what the heck is this? And he goes, I'm not gonna let you have first shot. And I'm like, what? It's my spot, you go to your spot. Anyway, so I learned real quick. Some of the guys were not real nice and some of them were really good dudes.
Yeah, that's why, you talking about Gary Klein, one of the funniest experiences I ever remember with you and Gary. I towed Randy Howell's boat out to California one time. We were fishing out there. You guys were fishing at Clear Lake, and I rode Randy's boat out there. And so Randy said, okay, I'll tell you what I'll do, Chris. I'll rent your car for the week. Okay. The car Randy Howell rented me was a Toyota Yaris. Okay. Yeah, if you ever seen a Yaris, it's one step above a go-kart. And so I'm riding through the hotels where you guys are staying, because everybody either stays in hotels or they stay in houses or they camp. And so I'm making the rounds, being the preacher. And you were over there and you called me over and said, hey, you want to go eat sushi with me and Gary Klein? I said, yeah, I'd rather go. And you go, hey, can you drive? And I remember riding in that Yaris and looking back, and Gary Klein's face is just right up on the seat like that, because he's in the back. And it was the most surreal moment for me, because I was like, Gary Klein is in the back of my Yaris right now, and I'm driving him around. That was great. I'll never forget that. But you guys really put up with me really well, and I appreciate you including me in a lot of things. But man, I appreciate you being my guest today. And I'll tell you this: what I tell everybody about Shaw Grigsby is that you're the same. You get as excited about catching, a crappie in your pond as you did about catching one on the Bassmaster Trail. And that's what I love about you. It's always, and you used to have some land down in South Carolina, and you let me come hunt. And I missed every one of your deer. I'm the perfect hunting guest because I'll miss every single one of your deer. I'll either wound them or miss all of them. But you really have. You're the same person on the water as you are at home and everywhere else. And I appreciate you, man. I appreciate you being my guest here today.
Love you, my friend, and I appreciate what you do. And I mean, you've taken care of us and kept us in line and kept us spiritually going there, And I was reading today, I think it's 2 Timothy 3. And if somebody wants a good reading thing for right now in this day and time, it's a good one to read because it'll make you get right quick because you see what's happening in our world. Right. And this was written well over 2,000 years ago, and it's true right to today. So, the Bible is 100% true. One of the greatest books I read, which was really cool in my early years, was A Case for Christ.
Right. And Lee Strobel. Yeah.
That's so cool. Yeah. So anyway, thanks for what you do, Chris.
Man, I appreciate you so much. And thanks for being my guest here today. Well, folks, this is the Bass Chaplain Fishing Podcast, where faith and fishing hook up, and we will see you next time.